Let's take it back to Tasmania, Australia, in 1995. Our story centers on Victoria Ann Elizabeth Cafasso, who was born on June 8, 1975, in Surrey, England. While she was technically a dual citizen of Britain and Italy, she really considered Italy her true home. People usually describe Victoria as a brilliant and restless spirit. She definitely inherited her smarts from her father, a successful lawyer who always dreamed she would follow in his footsteps and join the legal profession. Her mother, on the other hand, ran a travel agency, which explains where Victoria got her insatiable wanderlust. She had a serious passion for seeing the world and often jetted off to exotic locations by her mother's side. By all accounts, she lived a charmed life. She came from an affluent background, absolutely adored her family, and had a bright future ahead of her. We're talking about a girl who was academically gifted and fluent in Italian, English, and French. Her dad was over the moon when she finally announced that she wanted to pursue a career in law. Once she was old enough, she enrolled in an Italian university to begin her legal studies. But around the age of 20, right in the middle of her degree, the travel bug hit her hard. She sat her family down and dropped a bombshell. She wanted to head to England and stay with her grandparents for a while. Her father was a bit bummed out by the detour, but he knew he couldn't stop her, so Victoria packed her bags for England. It was there that she hatched a new plan. She was going to tackle Australia, specifically Tasmania, where she had a cousin. For context, Tasmania is a rugged island state about 240 kilometers south of the mainland. While still in the UK, Victoria called up her cousin, Simon Howard Delis, and asked if she could crash with him while she explored the land down under. Now, the two cousins weren't exactly close. In fact, they had only crossed paths twice in their entire lives before this phone call. Even so, Simon was totally cool with it and encouraged her to come visit the island. Victoria booked her ticket, packed her gear, and endured the long-haul flight, finally touching down on October 6, 1995. Simon met her at the airport with one of his buddies, and they drove out to his place in Beaumaris. Back then, the town was just a tiny blip on the map with a few hundred residents, mostly fishermen, surfers, and retirees. Simon was renting a small cottage there, which became Victoria's home base. On the drive in, they made a pit stop at Shirley's Lookout to take in the sweeping views of the local beach. That is where she was introduced to 3 locals, including a woman named Hilda Jackson. According to Hilda, she and Victoria clicked instantly. Hilda later remembered her as an incredibly warm soul, describing her as a thoughtful, soft-spoken, and intelligent girl who was stunning to look at. People actually remarked that Victoria and Hilda looked eerily similar, almost like sisters. Here is where the story takes a dark turn. Aside from that brief meeting, Victoria barely interacted with anyone else in town. She simply ran out of time. Within days, she would become the center of one of Tasmania's most brutal and baffling murder mysteries. She landed on October 6th, and she would be dead in less than a week. On October 9th, she swung by Hilda Jackson's place, the girl she had befriended just days earlier. She only stayed for about 30 minutes, but they made plans to spend a full day together soon. Later that same day, Victoria showed up at a small private birthday bash for a woman named Mandy. Mandy actually owned the cottage Simon was renting. Later that night, Victoria went for a relaxed stroll around the neighborhood, and she did the exact same thing the following day. She was just trying to get her bearings. Then came October 11th. She woke up early, around 10 past 8 in the morning, and told Simon she was heading down to the beach for a walk, borrowing a small carrier bag from him before she left. They shared breakfast and a quick chat, and by 9 o'clock, she walked out the door and headed toward the coast. Around 10 a.m., witnesses spotted Victoria sunbathing about 700 meters from the beach entrance near the Surfside Hotel. Hilda Jackson actually saw her walking there as well. Hilda noticed her wandering about and planned to head down for a run later, hoping to bump into her new friend. Tragically, that sighting was the last time anyone saw Victoria alive. About an hour later, Hilda laced up her running shoes. She decided to jog in the opposite direction, straight into the wind, thinking it would make the run home easier. That decision haunts her to this day, because she believes that if she had just run the other way, her presence might have scared off the killer. Cut to 1:30 p.m. A local named Margaret was walking her dog along a familiar stretch near Freshwater Creek. This was her daily ritual, her usual spot to get some fresh air. As she enjoyed the ocean breeze, something weird caught her eye in the distance, something resting right on the water's edge. As she moved closer, the horror of what she was seeing became clear. It was the partially undressed body of a young woman, lying face down in the sand with the tide gently washing over her. She looked completely lifeless. Margaret stood there, frozen in shock and dread. She stared in horror, trying to process the nightmare in front of her. After a few seconds, she spun around and sprinted to the nearest house, desperate for help. She pounded on a neighbor's door, alerting the two men inside about what she had found. They followed her back to the beach, mostly to make sure Margaret wasn't just seeing things. In a quiet town like this, stuff like this just didn't happen. But it was real. The men confirmed it was a human body and immediately dialed the police, kicking off an investigation that would eventually rattle the entire country. Identification happened fast. Victoria's family, including Simon, received the devastating news. It was clearly a homicide, and soon the beach was swarming with detectives, police, and forensic teams. Investigators started combing the scene and found Victoria's belongings scattered nearby: a bangle, sunglasses, her shoulder bag, sneakers, a ring, and a watch. These items were strewn all over the place. Victoria herself was found half naked at the tide line. The autopsy was brutal. She had suffered 17 stab wounds, including 2 fatal strikes to the heart and others to her head and face. She had deep cuts on her arms and hands, defensive wounds that proved she didn't go down without a fight. In those final moments, she desperately and bravely tried to fend off her attacker. 3 of her teeth were shattered, suggesting she had been bashed with a heavy blunt object. The blow was so forceful it actually caved in part of her face. This wasn't just a killing. It was a violent, prolonged assault. About 55 meters away, investigators found signs of a struggle, but 3 things were noticeably missing: her bikini bottoms, a towel, and the t-shirt she was wearing. Those items have never been found. From this point on, the police investigation turned into a disaster. There were multiple footprints in the sand near the body, some of which likely belonged to the killer. Unbelievably, investigators only took a cast of a single footprint, ignoring the others nearby, and the one cast they did make was garbage quality. Forensics later deemed it inconclusive because it lacked the detail needed to match anyone's shoe. A clear, well-preserved print could have told them everything: shoe size, walking style, and even the brand of footwear the killer was wearing. They could have used that evidence to nail a suspect or rule out innocent people. Instead, the cast was useless, and no other footprints were preserved. It gets worse. Before they even finished processing the scene, police moved Victoria's body and threw a blue tarp over her to shield her from onlookers. In doing so, they introduced foreign fibers and completely compromised the biological evidence. They also failed to tape off the area quickly enough, meaning curious locals were accidentally walking right through a murder scene. The list of failures just keeps going. Critical photos and video footage were never taken, and the state forensic pathologist didn't even show up to the scene, which caused massive delays in collecting and analyzing the evidence. The initial response was handled so poorly that the police essentially gave the killer a free pass to escape. So the question remains: who killed Victoria, and why? This daylight nightmare shattered the peace of that coastal community and sparked endless theories. One theory felt straight out of a movie script: an Italian mafia hit ordered because Victoria's father was a prosecutor back home. But that lead hit a dead end with zero evidence. Then, whispers started circulating about a serial predator lurking in the area. The fear wasn't unfounded. Just 2 years prior, another traveler had vanished into thin air. Her name was Nancy Grunwald, a 26-year-old from Germany who disappeared on March 12, 1993, while cycling down Tasmania's rugged east coast. Nancy touched down in Tasmania on March 6th, fresh from New Zealand. She rented a bike on the 9th, planning to see the island on 2 wheels. After passing through Street, Helen's, and staying with locals, she left her hostel on the morning of the 12th, heading south on the Tasman Highway. That was it, last seen around 11 a. She effectively dropped off the face of the earth. It is still an open case, and plenty of folks think there is a connection. When Victoria's body was found later, investigators grilled Simon, Hilda, and everyone else who had crossed paths with her during her brief trip. But they all had solid alibis and were cleared quickly. That is when the atmosphere turned toxic. Neighbors started eyeing neighbors, terrified they might be the next target. The paranoia was suffocating. People were scared they would be falsely accused, or worse, that they were living next door to a monster. Victoria's family flew in from Italy to stand on the very sands where she took her last breath. Following an autopsy, they brought her home for burial. The true heartbreak hit when they checked their mail back in Italy. A letter from Victoria, mailed just days before her death, was waiting for them. It was a voice from the grave she had written about how much she was loving her Australian adventure, completely unaware that her time was running out. The investigation was massive, over 300 names on the list, yet nobody saw a thing. Broad daylight, busy beach, silence. Weeks later, the Port Arthur massacre shocked the nation, leading police to briefly wonder if Martin Bryant was involved. Bryant was eventually cleared, shifting the focus to a specific quartet of persons of interest. Authorities narrowed the list down to a few key archetypes. The media dubbed them the fisherman, the biker, the doctor, and the surfer. Authorities believe the attack happened around 11:30 a.m., so let us break down the first suspect, the surfer. He is a ghost, an unidentified male placed at the scene by witnesses. Described as a fit guy in his 20s, perhaps a surfer, he was seen on the beach that morning. Witnesses described a young man, roughly 6 feet tall with an athletic build, sprinting across the sand near 11A. Right around that time, a light-colored Subaru station wagon pulled up nearby. Police suspect he was the driver. Whoever he was, he vanished moments after the crime. He has never been identified, never came forward despite the media storm, and that car has never been seen again. Then there is the fisherman, named Tony Kirkland. He popped up on the radar fast due to reports of some seriously creeping behavior in the neighborhood. Weeks prior, Hilda Jackson had a skin-crawling encounter on that exact beach. A stranger approached her near the dunes, walking slowly and asking for the exit. It was not the question, but the menacing vibe that panicked her. Shortly after, she realized the underwear she had stashed in the dunes while jogging had been swiped. When she got home, she found her neighbor's clothesline had been raided, specifically for women's apparel. It looked like someone was hunting in the area. Police linked this to Kirkland, a local fisherman already known to law enforcement. Detectives even theorized he might have intended to kill Hilda that day, but mistook Victoria for her. The resemblance was uncanny. Both were of similar age and build. Witnesses later confirmed the two women looked enough alike to confuse a predator. By 1998, a 17-year-old girl slapped a restraining order on him for stalking and threats. But here is the kicker. Kirkland seemed to love the attention. A magistrate noted he relished being a suspect. He treated the notoriety like a thrill ride. Still, he denied killing Victoria, and police eventually looked elsewhere, not finding enough to pin it on him. Suspect number 3, the biker, Gary Holmes. He was not a gang member, just a local guy with a motorcycle, but the nickname stuck. Holmes lived nearby, and his behavior after the murder raised red flags. When witnesses mentioned the crime, he reportedly froze like a zombie. Was it shock or was it guilt? During questioning, his story changed repeatedly, which made investigators think he was covering his tracks. Most damning were the fresh injuries on his face and arms on the day of the murder. He claimed he had punched a hole in a door during a fight with his ex-wife. Investigators were skeptical of the excuse. However, after a thorough dig into his background, the biker was largely ruled out. That brings us to the doctor. Dr. Roman Hassel, a Czech-born gynecologist, remains the most controversial figure. He denied everything, but the scrutiny on him was intense. In October of 1995, he was working in Street Helens, fresh out of prison for pulling a knife on his second wife. He had only been in town a few weeks. It turned out the man had a disturbing obsession with blades. Police quickly realized he had zero alibi for the morning of October 11th. He claimed he was homesick, but nobody could vouch for him, and he was sporting fresh scratches on his face. At first, he said he never went to the beach. Then, a girlfriend told police he admitted to being there, destroying his credibility. Later, an ex-wife asked him point-blank if he was the killer. His response was chilling. Maybe I did. I don't recall. He was never charged, but he was stripped of his medical license after a scandal involving malpractice. Tasmanian authorities say the door is still open for new leads on the doctor. In fact, they have stated they would not be shocked if he turned out to be the guy. But without hard proof, the trail went cold. Victoria's father died of a broken heart weeks later. They rest side by side now. Cold case units still run the evidence through modern tech every few years, hoping for a breakthrough, but so far, nothing has stuck. Detectives insist that nobody, including the 4 men I just listed, is fully in the clear until this is solved. For the locals, the damage was permanent. Hilda Jackson put it best. We went from leaving doors unlocked to looking at our neighbors with suspicion. The trust evaporated. People packed up and left. Marriages crumbled under the stress of living in a town where a killer was likely walking free among them. A leading coroner reviewed the files and delivered a grim verdict. He concluded that even if they found the culprit today, the initial investigation was so botched that reasonable doubt would let him walk. A conviction is virtually impossible. The expert added, unless someone confesses, this case is closed. It is a tragedy beyond words. Victoria's family never healed. And the most haunting detail? Victoria's teeth were missing from the scene. They have never been found, meaning someone, somewhere, is likely keeping them as a trophy, keeping them as twisted souvenirs, a grim reminder of the day they ended a blameless life and left this small community in shambles.